So good morning, welcome everyone. You have many questions, so we'll be able to raise your question in a few seconds. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I want to make sure that everyone clearly understands the situation with respect to industry profitability. We are expecting $33.8 billion US dollars profit this year. That is down from the 38.4 billion we were projected in December. It's largely due to the rise in oil price. But the airlines are still making healthy profit, and particularly the return on invested capital, which should be 8.5%, exceeds the cost of capital, which is 7.7%. Second point, you will notice that our profit estimation for 2017 is 38 billion. It is higher than the 34.5 billion we previously thought. Most of the difference, so 2017, most of the difference is the one-off tax credits and other special items. So I want to be clear that there has been no dramatic downward shift in airline profits from 2017. Okay, everybody here with that? It's certainly true to say that 2018 is a tougher year, and the airlines have done a good job of managing the changing environment. If you remember, it is a resilient industry that has been through almost 2 decades of significant and dramatic changes since we last met here in Sydney in 2000. A lot of changes. And with that, with these comments, our colleague Alan Joyce, Phong, and I, we are ready to take out your questions. For individual questions related to airlines, there are a press briefing this afternoon, so you should raise your question related to individual airlines this afternoon and not now, if I may.
Yeah, correct. So, happy to take questions. Please identify yourself and your publication. And again, as Mr. Juniac said, if you can refrain from questions specifically related to individual airlines, the CEOs are all around here, so you can find them at different points during the next day and a half. Who wants to ask the first question? Andreas.
Speech, German aviation journalist. Alexandre, your motto was the business of freedom and being proud of it. And as you rightly pointed out in your speech, currently there's a climate of getting less freedom, especially in trade, the EU-US trade war, all other things of less freedom in a way in the current politics worldwide. So I'd like to ask you for a more concrete comment. How do you fear that this current climate of having less freedom in the world, especially in economics, and having this trade war coming up, how that affects aviation also in terms of passenger numbers? Is that really something that threatens aviation? If there's less freedom, it's probably less business travel. So do you see some impact on that also for passenger numbers and for airline finances? Thank you.
First of all, generally, we think that from a macroeconomic standpoint, all these barriers to trade and travel are bad news. It's a bad news from an industry standpoint because when you refrain people from traveling, or when you put barriers to trade, it's bad news for passenger traffic or for cargo. For the moment, we haven't faced any significant decline in numbers of passenger or cargo related to trade wars or to protectionist barriers up to now. But if it continues, it could happen. I don't know if you confirm or if you have...
Yeah, can I say I agree with Alexandre on that. I mean, we're all keeping a watchful eye on it. And I think you look at when we've had, for example, we've had a number of free trade agreements that have been linked between Australia and a number of countries in the region. And we've seen a significant boost in freight, we've seen a significant boost in travel as a consequence of that. For example, our Japanese market at the moment is being dramatically benefiting from those free trade agreements. So we see the upside when trade is released. We certainly have to keep a watchful eye that there's no downside if that regulation and those trade barriers were to be imposed.
Okay, next question, Tom.
Tom Valentine from Orient Aviation magazine. I realise it's politically sensitive, but essentially dozens of your member airlines have been threatened by Beijing over the One China issue and forced to change their websites and that sort of thing. Where does that sit with the business of freedom, and what is your attitude towards that sort of pressure being put on your members?
You know, what we say that our members, first of all, it's individual decision of our members to comply or not to comply with what the states they serve are imposing on them, first of all. Secondly, usually as an association, we say that we have to comply with what the states are asking us for. So in that case, we respect the decision taken by the individual airlines and the decision that has been asked by the Chinese government.
Next
comments? No?
Oh, next question, Marissa? No, it was from behind, sorry.
Okay. Yves de Jong, Daily Telegraph, the Netherlands. I have a question to Mr. Juniac on infrastructure. In Holland, we have a slot constraint at Schiphol this year, and there's a new airport being built, but the opening has been delayed. Is this typical for your concern?
What do you mean? It's typical.
You mentioned there have to be built new airports, and in the Netherlands there's built a new airport, but it's not being used. What is your comment to that?
So, you know, our comment is the following. We first of all, we are in a capacity crisis in many areas, Europe being one of these areas. These capacity constraints translate into the increasing number of slot-constrained airports. We have more and more, and in the future, for the next 10 years, we should see an increased number of slot-constrained airports in the world, and it's true in the Netherlands. We say two things. First of all, we have to maintain and to improve the current slot worldwide slot guideline system, because we have to cope with this slot constraint situation. But we urge government to build new airports, because we cannot only stay in this situation with such a limited capacity. It's a solution, it's a transitory solution in many situations to deal with a capacity constraint situation. But we have to increase capacity. And you remember in the speech I said we need more capacity. So we say congratulations to the Dutch government to build more airports.
Yeah, but they delayed the opening, so we have a new airport and it's not being used. So what are you doing on that?
It's a pity. It's a pity.
Marissa?
I was going to say that, I mean, I think this is an issue all around the globe, and you know, we've been talking in Sydney for a second airport for 50 years. We finally got a decision to build one, but it won't come online until 2026. The airports are constrained. And the other thing this links into, which is a very important discussion we're going to have tomorrow, is on airport privatisation. And Alexandre today talked about how they are not more efficient, they are more expensive, and they've led to a bad outcome for consumers. And we've had a privatisation here in Australia, which we don't think has been good. So I think we're going to have a important discussion on the airports, the infrastructure, the regulation of airports, and the privatisation of airports. And I think all of this comes together. There are very important discussions that we are very focused on within IATA, and I think the whole world aviation industry is paying attention to the bad example that's been set here with the privatisation of airports in this country.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that IATA's effort obviously is looking at the industry as a whole, and this is what the board has been focusing on, and to looking at it to see how we can encourage all the relevant authorities to pay some attention, because ultimately we believe that this is going to have a spin-off effect on the economy, and it's good for the country. So.
Yes. The question has to do with the re-regulation of the industry, and of course it's a concern because of current bills being moved, and especially in the US, to establish new passenger standards. And they are worrisome that it's a return to a regulated structure, but there are also some legitimate passenger well-being concerns involved in that. Has the industry considered self-regulating in that regard? And by that I mean by setting up minimum standards of service, perhaps, or minimum capacity constraints on board the cabin, for example, or minimum standards of dimension for accessibility for passengers? Is that something that you would be open to?
Among the various missions of IATA, setting standards is a key one. But I have to say that setting standards for minimum service, I would be a bit annoyed to tell my friend Phong or my friend Alan, your minimum service should be to have a seat of 33-inch pitch and all that stuff. It's the airline job to do it. Of course, there are areas on which safety, accessibility for disabled people, this type of thing, that could be regulated and on which we could have a voice.
I agree completely with Alexandre. And what a lot of airlines are doing, I mean, this is a hugely competitive industry. There's a lot of competition on all of the markets, for example, that we operate on. And what a number of airlines have done, for example, here in different regions, we've published a customer charter, which does put down the minimum standards that we have and how we're going to respond to complaints, what are our rules, and that charter is well publicised, and it is there with every airline in the domestic Australian market as an example. But it is up to the airlines to be competitive, and customers do walk, they do move, and if my standards are very different from Singapore Airlines, I know I'm going to lose customers. And I think competition has made it the best time for travellers in the world. I mean, we've seen airfares come down by 30% in this region. We've seen the customer service improve dramatically and the customer ratings go up dramatically over that period of time. So airlines are delivering for its consumers, and airlines are in a highly competitive market, and if we don't, we'll lose the customers and we've no right to continue on business.
I just want to add that, again, from IATA's perspective as an industry body, we should be looking at setting standards to enhance the efficiency of operation within the industry, or standards that would facilitate the customer convenience, such as what Alexandre has mentioned about the baggage tracking, which will allow us to provide, basically 24-hour passenger tracking of the bags, which will reduce mishandling and all that. What we shouldn't set is standard that restrict the innovation and creativity of airlines to offer different products to our customers, because ultimately our customers would have that choice of choosing what kind of product they want to go on.
Right, I understand all of that. My main concern would be if you face a challenge where all of a sudden a government says, well, your bathrooms no longer, thank you, your bathrooms no longer have room for people who need to move around in them, and therefore you're going to have to do this. Are you going to wait until basically the law becomes mandatory, or are you going to look at these issues voluntarily in advance? Or do you believe that there's no risk of law?
Marissa, just one thing maybe we could look at is a few years ago at Cape Town, we passed a resolution as an industry with some general principles on passenger rights. So that's an example of the industry trying to get ahead of the curve and helping regulators deal with these types of issues. But maybe what we can do, since we've got a lot of journalists and a lot of questions, we can save supplemental questions for later on. Yeah, is that all right? Great, over here.
Thank you. Angus Whitley from Bloomberg News. When IATA posted a photograph of its board governors yesterday after its meeting, there was a lot of criticism online about the fact that there was only one woman in the lineup. And events like this week, it's very rare to see a woman in a leadership position on the panel like this. So, Mr. Goh, what do you think of that? And is IATA as a representative body taking any action to improve the mix?
I think it's not just IATA. I think all of us in our individual organizations are actively promoting more women to come up to the senior management area. And I think all of us, I can't speak for other airlines, but certainly in Singapore Airlines, we're actively looking at, of course, the individuals are rising up the rank based on their own competence and capability, which just make sure that we've got the opportunity for them to do so.
Can I also support that? I mean, I think IATA is a function of what's happening in the airlines, because to be on the board of governors, you have to be CEO of the airline, obviously. So that's the nature of what's happened in the aviation industry. And a lot of airlines have programs of diversity. And we want to, we're all fishing in the same pond for talent. We want to have more females engaged in all aspects of aviation. One of the things that, for example, that we are all trying to address is the pilot shortage that's out there. I think one of the requirements is we know is 640,000 new pilots in the next 20 years. We need a lot more females. So 3% of the world's pilots are female. We need a lot more females applying and going for those jobs. We're putting programs in place, and other airlines are, in order to do that, because that's how you change the diversity on it. And I don't think we're that long in a lot of airlines away from seeing a big change over the years. 40% of my direct reports are females, and I think there's a lot of airlines that have that, and that succession is coming true. It is slow because of the nature of the industry, the history of the industry, and the male dominance of certain of those professions in it. But we are breaking down those barriers, and I think it's only a matter of time before that profile changes.
Thanks, but as an IATA, can you not do more as a governing body to stipulate ratios or improve that progress?
The point, as you know, for the governing, for the board of governors in IATA, it's they have to be CEOs of airlines. So we strictly rely on the board of the airlines to appoint female as CEOs, and so we cannot replace that. But we are pushing, and we will have a resolution tomorrow on gender diversity. It's not a resolution, it's a motion. It's a motion on gender diversity. So it's an action that IATA and the IATA board is taking to push more women in the key positions. But at the board level, we strictly rely on the airlines to appoint CEOs, women CEOs.
But I also think it comes down to the country involved. I mean, there's very clear in a lot of the major, as example in Australia, a lot of the major companies do have clear targets. The ASX, the stock exchange here, publishes targets about women directors. We publish all targets about what we're trying to do in diversity on the management teams. And it does come down also, because you are hunting talent in your individual countries, about what those countries are doing. And there's huge progress being made here, as there are in a lot of countries around the globe. So I think that, again, is outside of IATA's control.
Okay, take a question here.
Hello, this is Andreas Schulz of Biz Travel Germany, especially addressed to Alexandre. As far as the ongoing conflict in the Gulf, the blockade of Qatar, and especially the members Qatar Airways and the other partners around, do you see in this high political conflict a role of IATA to peace that ongoing conflict, or do you see any kind of influence from IATA point of view?
So first of all, we are not a political organization, so it's in such conflict we do not take any position. The only point, because we are representing the industry, that we have officially put forward is to say that we want connectivity to be maintained between Qatar and the rest of the world. So that's all.
Okay. Question from Phong?
Another political question. Can you update us on the IATA position regarding Brexit and the bilaterals, please?
So,
Malcolm Ginsburg, Business Travel News.
So on Brexit, as you know, IATA is not participating, is not part of the negotiation. Similarly to the previous question, what we said is that Brexit, if there is a Brexit, we would like connectivity to be maintained between the UK and the rest of the world, meaning between the UK and Europe, and between the UK and the other countries, especially those which have an agreement with Europe that will have to be renegotiated by the UK when they are outside Europe. I don't know if I am clear. So the position of IATA is maintain connectivity between the UK and the world. But you know what we say also is we have set some dates. We said that the negotiation or the key elements of the negotiation regarding aviation should be known 6 months in advance of the exit, because you know the airline have to prepare the scheduling and the sales of tickets. And so it's, if we don't know what to do 6 months in advance, it will be a big mess for the passengers.
Okay, a question at the back.
Hi, Seth Miller, atn.aero, way back here. Curious, there's a few airlines these days that are struggling financially on the brink of bankruptcy or sort of past that are being propped up by their governments. Alitalia, Air India, South African Airways are a few. There are a few others also. Does IATA have a position on sort of the how the governments are supporting those versus allowing free trade and competition to sort of run the industry and how that could play out?
No, we have no position on that. It's purely an issue that is dealing airline by airline and country by country, first of all. But secondly, it shows that despite the fact that we are making, a good year and that we expect 2018 to be also a positive year, making 4.1% as an average of margin is not comfortable. And it's true everywhere.
Okay, we'll take a question here, third from the front.
Thank you. My name is Tony, and I'm from People's Daily China. Several days ago, the windshield of a Chinese airline just broke up while in flight. Although there was no significant loss or damage, do you think it reflected some safety problems in Chinese aviation industry, or just incidental? Thank you.
No, we don't think that, and frankly, from a safety point of view, the Chinese record is exceptionally good, as you know. But what it means, that even if you are exceptionally good, you have to be vigilant, pay attention, never release, never make any compromise, never release your vigilance, never.
Okay, question here.
Aaron Carr with Aviation Daily. So far it seems that the industry is relatively withstanding the fuel price increases. At what point does it become a real problem, and do you fear that a year from now, if prices continue escalating, that you could be talking about an industry struggling to maintain profitability?
We have already mentioned that the slight decline in our profit expectation for 2018 was coming from the rise in fuel price, but it's a slight decline. It's difficult to fix the threshold above which everybody would be significantly impacted. It's difficult. Secondly, it's also an individual decision by each airline to decide whether or not they want to increase the fares to reflect the increase in fuel cost. And it's something that IATA is not intervening. It's not our job to do that. It would be totally antitrust, as you can imagine. And so it heavily depends on the individual financial position of each of our members. I cannot give you a magic figure saying above 80 or above 92 would harm. It depends on, first of all, on each airline, on its hedging policy, but there are a lot of inputs. So sorry for that, not to be able to answer precisely.
Yeah, I think I add to that. Again, IATA as an industry body is really talking about doing things that we can actually help to effectively manage the cost effectiveness and so forth. And fuel is something that is obviously outside our control. And it, again, is down to the individual airlines' measures to look at their own fuel efficiency measures as well as how they respond to the market.
Okay, question here.
Yeah, Eric Runnett from newspaper Le Soir, Belgium. Is a pilot shortage a problem for your IATA?
It is starting to be a problem in some parts of the world, and if it continues like that, it will become a problem to hire the proper pilot. So what we are working on is to see with the training organizations that are very diverse, and sometimes they depend on airlines, sometimes they depend on the state, sometimes they are purely private, quote-unquote, schools or universities, and with also the equipment manufacturers, we are looking at dimensioning properly the training system to cope with the expected growth. Because you have, first of all, you have to have new schools or new training centers. You have to invest in simulators, so it's quite a significant point, and we are looking at that.
Can I say, I mean, I think all of the airlines are individually looking at it, and it is, and depending on the region, there are different levels of problems. We've seen a bit of a shortage here in Australia, and airlines here are investing very heavily in we're opening a new pilot academy next year, and then investing tens of millions of dollars in that. And going back to the diversity question in particular, it's also getting people at schools interested in the STEM subjects that will encourage them to be pilots someday. And we've our chief pilots, the female chief pilots that have gone to schools here in Australia, encouraging young girls. So we have a bigger pool to select people from, and we get more people getting the qualifications so that the pipeline is there all the way through. And I think it is going to be over the next 2 decades. I think Boeing and Airbus are forecasting, as I mentioned, the requirement for over 640,000 new pilots. So a lot of airlines are having to get that pipeline built up. We've got a big requirement with new aircraft coming. A lot of airlines have the same thing. And if you don't fix it even at the school level, I think you'll have a problem into the future. And I think it's up to all of us to get that pipeline going.
Just to add that in the case of Singapore Airlines, we're fortunate that we're not facing any immediate pilot shortage. However, we have taken practice steps to go ahead and set up joint ventures in training, pilot training, simulator training, with both Airbus as well as CAG. It's also part of our contribution to provide training for the industry, because we train more 40 over airlines in the case of the setup that we have in Airbus. And the CAG case, when it's set up, we similarly think that we can contribute our part in training the pilot's requirements.
It's an issue that that all the airlines are conscious of, and they are dealing with that. We are not very worried because we think that everybody is conscious of that and will take the appropriate measures. But we follow, we try to bridge a gap when there is at IATA level.
Take a question here. No, in front. We'll try and do one question per journalist, if that's all right. Just there's a lot of people who want to ask questions.
Hello, it's Jordan Chong from Australian Aviation Magazine. I'm just wondering, Mr. Juniac, when you talk about it's a thin buffer, the $7 something average profit per passenger, the 4% margin. Just wondering, I guess it sort of seems like it's the industry's resetting itself for to set a different benchmark, because if 4% was thin now, it would have been welcome maybe a decade ago. Like, what would you regard as sort of an industry expectation for margins now that the industry's reset itself at this level?
You know, what we are saying is that we are happy to make margins and to have a return on invested capital that exceeds cost of capital, but 4.1% objectively is not a big number. When you compare to other sectors, it's not a big number. It's as you know that perfectly. It's totally insane to fix a kind of magic threshold above which you think you are the king of the planet.
Right, we'll take the question after that.
Alan?
Oh, sorry. I'm going to say, Jordan, I think Alexandre is right. I mean, what he's pointing out is that it doesn't take much of things moving and other input variables for airline profitability to have pressure. So it's the impression out there that these are significant profits being made by the industry as a whole. They're not. And there are a lot of other industries and a lot of other parts of the value chain that airlines deal with, whether it's aircraft manufacturing, travel agents, whether it's airports. And in particular, we're pointing out tomorrow some of the numbers that airports are making. And the profitability of those other values are way in excess of what airlines are getting. So these are thin margins. There's a lot of other profitability in the chain that we need to make sure it's shared fairly, and that the customers aren't getting this benefit out of it, like at high airport charges that we are seeing in a number of places around the world. Thank you.
The national newspaper in Abu Dhabi, the IATA report has outlined the a global trend for profitability, and I wanted to ask whether you thought the Middle Eastern airlines, how would they stack up against that general global trend? Are they ahead of the curve, with the curve, especially that they've traditionally benefited from higher oil prices that bring premium bookings? So I wanted to get your thoughts on where they stood there, and also to follow up on my colleague's questions on pilot shortage and how you thought that might particularly hit profitability for Middle East airlines, where there's 3 big hubs competing for talent.
So for the figures of profitability, the Middle East airlines have recovered since last year, but the expected profit we have for them is below the average. And in terms of pilot shortage, these airlines are facing the same issues as others, and they are taking, as far as I know, at least for one of them, they are taking appropriate measures to dimension their training system to have the appropriate pilots. But they don't have a specific situation compared to others. And they are taking, I think they will take the appropriate measures to cope with that.
Yeah. For detailed questions on the forecast, we have a special briefing at lunchtime with our Chief Economist, Brian Pierce. So
and you will have the precise figures.
Yeah.
I have them, but we want to overwhelm you with them.
Perfect. We'll take a question at the back.
Thank you. Danny Lee, South China Morning Post newspaper in Hong Kong. Forgive me if my question might seem repetitive, because I've been outside the room. However, Mr. Goh, with ultra long haul Singapore and New York, do you have an idea of what would be the price of oil that would become unacceptable when oil prices rise? Do you have a price in mind where the price will go over a level that might be uneconomical for you to do ultra long haul? And Mr. Joyce, do you see the new aircraft like 787s and the 50s as a good long-term hedge against the price of oil rising?
So this is really a IATA forum. So this is probably not the appropriate place for individual airline questions, as we've said. But I just give you a simple answer on that. Any price point for us will be a matter of demand and supply. It's not predetermined what it should be.
And Danny, you have a chance this afternoon. Qantas is holding a press conference with our senior management, so you're welcome to attend, and we're happy to answer the questions there.
What time? What time?
Oh, well, Ingrid.
Okay, other questions? We'll go to the back here.
Good morning, Sarah from Gulf News in Dubai. I wanted to ask a question about trade tensions, and I apologize if this has been asked before. Are you concerned about the impact of that on the aviation industry? And I'm also curious about your thoughts on possible sanctions on Iran, what that does to airlines there and in the region around it.
The first point, we have answered that question, so it was the first question raised. On the second point, we still have to see precisely what the type of sanctions are to evaluate the consequences on the various Iranian airlines we have as members, or the consequences on the various equipments orders and all that stuff. We lack some precisions yet. It's an ongoing process, as you know.
Okay, we'll take a question here, and then we'll come over here.
Hello. أنا أشرف الحديدي from الأهرام newspaper Egypt. Yeah. About MOU about the agreement which is signed between AFRA and IATA. How do you see this agreement will help African airlines to enhance safety and security?
As you know, first of all, the track record of Africa in terms of safety has been totally exceptional. So no fatalities, and we were coming from that situation actually. So it's an exceptional track record. On that point, we can proudly, it's not very modest, say that IATA has contributed to that. Contributed by training, by informing, by auditing our various members, by training the civil aviation. So we have done our job. I think a good job. So it's not very modest, but can be proud of what we've done. The third point is the agreement. On this agreement with AFRA, we consolidate the links we have with our African members by increasing our efforts in training, in consulting, by also providing some means to our members or to civil aviation, to be able to deal with the main issues they have in their individual countries. We want also, to get rid of block fund, because there are a lot of block fund countries in this part of the world. It's not the only one, but there's some. So it's a good agreement. And we have a very, very, very good relations with not only AFRA, but the members and the civil aviation on that continent, and with good results.
Okay.
We are quite proud of that.
Yeah, the question for Karen first, and then we'll move our way down the road.
Karen Walker at Transport World. Each year what we're seeing is some of the fastest growing airlines and now some of the biggest airlines in the world, and also some of the most innovative, of course, are the low-cost carriers, not just short haul but long haul. But that as a segment is not reflected in the IATA membership. Is that of a concern to the board, and are there any approaches that can be made to get those more reflected in the membership?
First of all, 10% of our members are what we call new model / low-cost airlines. And you will see among the new members that have joined last year, you will see a significant, you will see tomorrow, we have already seen, there is a significant proportion of low-cost carriers, first of all. You're right to say that the big ones are not members, but we are telling them, please join us, they are more than welcome. And we will do everything to convince them that it is their interest to be there.
But there's nothing that can be done to entice them more than sort of saying we like it.
It's a conviction, it's
Like with any association, we have to continue, we generate benefits for them. And I think the whole aviation industry, including low cost, I fundamentally believe, and I ran a low cost carrier for 5 years, benefits from IATA. And IATA is delivering for the entire industry, but we have to appeal more, and Alexandre's doing that. He's attracting a lot more low-cost carriers, and it's continuing to keep that message out there and make sure that they see the benefit that IATA brings, which I think a lot of them are currently doing.
As soon as they come to the IATA AGM, they are convinced of the utility of the association. That's.
So you heard what Alexandre said. I think as an association, we of course would like more representation from across all segments of our industry, including the LCCs, and to the extent that we can understand what their concerns are and how IATA can make it more attractive for them, we will look at it. I think some of these major initiatives have been undertaken, whether it's slots issue, airport privatizations, RFID for baggage handling. These are industry-wide issues, and it will benefit also our colleagues in the low-cost carriers.
They should be convinced that participating into designing the standards or into the various advocacy matters we are working on is of their interest.
Okay, we have time just for a couple more questions. So one.
It's the same question.
Okay, then we'll move over to Cara, and that'll be the last question.
Hi, Karam Jit from the Straits Times in Singapore. I'm just wondering, with regard to infrastructure, do you have serious concerns, particularly on air traffic management issues, and in particular in the Asia Pacific, where we're seeing a lot of growth, also a lot of fragmentation in terms of ATC providers, and given that Mr. Goh and Mr. Joyce are both here, two of the biggest Asian carriers, how does that impact you as an airline and in terms of your vision for your own growth?
We have concern about air traffic control as well as airport everywhere in the world, and particularly also in Asia Pacific. We have expressed our concern in China several times. There are some concern in Southeast Asia when linking the various states together on very narrow congestion areas. So yes, there are concerns. And we are urging government to make the decision, because for a new system to be implemented, it takes 5 to 10 years. It was my former business, so I know that. I know that very well.
I think it's an area where, as an industry body, IATA would have to get involved quite actively with the local carriers in the regions to try to work out a way to talk to our authorities and get everybody to work together. Ultimately, a better ATC control regime would benefit everybody, and you'll make it much more efficient for operation there, and ultimately also the spin-off effect for the economy for that region.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, you look at some of the air traffic control issues that we're facing, there is huge congestion. I take Melbourne, Sydney, the second largest city pair in the world. And you go back 20 years, it was a shorter block time by 50 minutes than it is today. It takes over an hour. Why? The aircraft are not flying slower, they're flying faster. It's because air traffic control congestion is actually causing that problem, and that's a huge impulse on all of the airlines. Now, our government here is spending a lot of money on a new air traffic control system, but we also have to get the balance right. And as Alexandre said, you can overspend on these things that are not efficient, so it has to be efficiently done. Has to work with military aerospace, which is also an issue in some places. It has to be an investment that gets a return out of it and doesn't end up posing huge costs because of those changes on the airlines. And we think there is a balance there. It needs big investment, it needs big changes in a lot of cases. There's some change happening here, which we're very happy about, but those costs need to be managed.
Great. Thank you all very much. The AGM, World Air Transport Summit will resume very shortly on the 5th level. Thank you.
Thank you very much.